94.3 WYBC, the rhythm of the city. Juan Castillo with you. This is the Electric Drum. And this week it's my pleasure to have the doctors in the house, man. That's right. And they've got a podcast. It's called Being. It's on SoundCloud. And what they do is pretty much help folks in the community with their mental health issues. And I have with me Dr. Toya in the building, Dr. Taj and Dr. Nakia. How you doing, ladies?
Good. How are you?
How are you?
All right. So I'm gonna go with Dr. Taj first. Tell us about the podcast. You know, what is it all about? And tell us what people can look forward to when they listen to it.
Sure. Actually, it's a podcast that speaks to our lives, right? And sort of working in these spaces. That some spaces are welcoming, some spaces are not. But we talk about the ups, the downs, and all the in-betweens as we go about our day, performing our day-to-day tasks of helping people in their mental health struggles, good, bad, or indifferent. We share those things. And then, you know, in the midst of that, we talk about our day-to-day stuff, our own personal stuff. Again, the good, the bad, and the indifferent, and the funny. You know, we definitely have a lot of comedy. Yeah.
There you go. That's great. So Dr. Nakia, you up next on the mic. So tell me, how did you get together with these beautiful ladies?
Okay, so the short version is that we all work together. Taj and I worked together. Dr. Taj and I worked together for about 5 years. Yeah. And then about 3 years into that, Toya joined us. We have a funny story about how that all came together. And, you know, it was just like we were the diversity in a lot of ways. And so obviously we just tried to support each other, elevate each other, and have these discussions that basically now is our podcast. It's just us talking, you know, figuring it out together.
Right. So the purpose of this interview, which I had told you guys earlier, is for our community to get to know you individually, right? We'll talk a little bit more about the podcast and what you guys actually are going to be talking about and how important that is, especially around the mental health issues that we have in our community. So we're going to go to Dr. Toya now. So tell me about yourself, right? Where you from? You know, what's your journey been like?
Yeah, so I'm from New Jersey, born and raised.
Jersey, yeah.
Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl. Yeah.
You like house music? You like house music?
Of course.
Okay, yeah, because I was gonna say, if you didn't know how you didn't like house music, you ain't from Jersey. All right, go ahead.
Music.
There you go. Me too. All right.
Yeah, so I started out actually as a school psychologist, and what I was seeing in the schools wasn't just about learning disabilities, but it was more than that. And I didn't have the language for it. I didn't understand what I was seeing, but I knew I was seeing something. And so that's when I decided to go back to school. And what I later learned that I was seeing was trauma. A lot of the students were traumatized for a variety of different reasons. But coming from, you know, the inner cities, having the struggles that come along with that, a lot of times, you know, teachers didn't know how to deal with it. And so I went back to school to understand that more. And in the midst of that journey, that's where I met these two ladies. And now I have a practice split in both New York City and New Jersey, working with children, teenagers, and adults. And I do individual, couples, and family therapy.
So tell me about your early days, you know, high school. What was it about? You know, what was your life about during that time, and what were you thinking about?
Yeah, so actually, I went to a performing arts high school. I wanted to be a dancer. I wanted to be an Alvin Ailey dancer.
What school?
Rosa Parks High School for the Fine and Performing Arts. In
nice name. Is that in Newark?
No, it's in Patterson.
Okay, all right. Mm-hmm. Keep it moving. Yep. All right, so Rosa Parks. Okay, so what?
Yeah, so I went there, and after I graduated, I went to undergrad. I did want to be a doctor though, so I wanted to like dance and be a doctor. And my grandmother used to tell me the saying. She said, "A dancer can't doctor, but a doctor can dance." That's what she always used to say. So I was like, okay. So I actually went into school pre-med, but me and the sciences didn't get along. We had like a very love-hate relationship. So after my first psychology course, I was hooked. And so that's what started me in, on this journey to becoming a psychologist.
Wow, that's awesome. So tell me about any influences in your life. Who influenced you coming up and guided you in this dream of yours?
Ooh, so many people. But my parents, of course. My mom, very strong Black woman, very focused on education. So she would be one. I had a lot of mentors in school. Nancy Boyd Franklin, she's a psychologist, very well known in the field. She was very influential in my training and studying. And then these two ladies, of course, because when I met them, I actually came in as a student. I was finishing my training. Okay. So they kind of, took me under their wing a little bit, but we also bonded as like colleagues too. So I would definitely say they've had an impact on me as well.
So that's awesome, right?
Thanks, friend.
It is.
So after you graduated from undergraduate, right? Like, most people, that's like a crossroads, right? Like, what took you from that day to where you are today? Talk to me about that day you graduated, and tell me about that feeling and your journey after that.
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to do more. Once I had the bachelor's, I was like, it doesn't stop here. I gotta keep going. And so initially I went to get my master's for school psychology because I did want to work with kids. I wanted to be in the school district. I've always had a love for kids. And so that's when I went and got my master's. And during that time, you have to do your internship in the school. So I worked in Patterson Public Schools, and that's when I was seeing, a lot of trauma. And like I said, didn't exactly know what I was looking at, but I knew that there was something that I needed to understand a little bit more clearly. So that's how I got back to school for my doctorate.
Awesome. So that's Dr. Toya, y'all. Absolutely. So now we're gonna go back to Dr. Taj. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So let's talk about your journey from short pants days.
Yes.
Remember we used to have to wear those short pants in the summer, right?
Yes. So for me, it was going off to school. I knew I wanted to do something to help in the health field, right? I wasn't too sure initially, and everybody goes to college, and that first year is sort of hit or miss of where you're going to go, right? You have your sights set, and then you shift gears. So just through trial and error, just sort of looking at taking different electives, I was able to come across occupational therapy. So I mastered and sort of studied the science of helping, right? And so it's sort of looking at a person's activities of daily living, helping them to be as independent as possible, right? So let's just say you have had hip surgery, knee surgery, your life, right, as it was before, might have been relatively painful. And after surgery now, here I go. I show up and I help you with compensatory strategies and different ways with equipment to do those same tasks. It may take you a little longer. It may be a little different, but you're still maintaining your independence. My goal is to allow you to make sure that you maintain your independence. So my journey was easy. I mean, once I got into it, I got into the anatomies, I got into the chemistries. I'm a science geek that way. So, and then I think of things in a very abstract way, right? So occupational therapy, you definitely have to think outside of the box because nothing about it is normal. Okay. So you're having to take the simple, right? That may be simple to everybody else, but it's now made complicated because of a condition, whether it's a mental health condition or a physical condition, it's made complicated. So now how do you make that complicated back simple? You have to think of outside of the box ways. And that's something that I just love to do.
And so it's interesting because because what you're doing now also, in terms of like, you guys working on this podcast with being and trying to help folks, period, right? You mentioned activities of daily living, and throughout the day as we go through in life, right, we got those moments, right? But in addition to that, right, we're all looking for hope, right?
Sure.
So I'm quite sure that in the process of you helping someone get back to who they were physically, right, you got to somehow instill that hope, right? Because without that, like, there's no success, right?
Sure. Yeah. And from an OT perspective, I sort of see myself as a cheerleader, right?
Okay.
All the things that you think you can't do, I'm gonna find a way that you can do it. Hook, as the older generation, the more seasoned generation would say, hook or crook, we gonna get you to that destination.
Man, I forgot that one. So quiet as you kept, right?
right. So that is the goal.
So tell me about where did you grow up? Where? What city?
I'm born and raised in Hamden.
Really? So you local? Okay.
Local. I went away to Temple University in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Came back that was my undergrad. Came back, and I went to Sacred Heart for my graduate, and then ended up at A.T. Still University in Mesa, Arizona, for my doctorate degree.
So what high school did you go to?
Hamden High.
The Hamden High. All right.
Yes.
What made you come back?
I have a close-knit family, so I'm relatively close to my mom, my dad, my gram at the time, who was alive. So for me it was, and I'm an only child. So for me it was like, I got to get back to my family. Like, okay, this is Philadelphia life is Philadelphia life, but my family is my family.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we're glad you came back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Nakia, what's happening, girl? How you doing?
Hey, thank you for having us.
Absolutely, no question. So tell me about your early beginnings. Where did you grow up?
Elm City, New Haven.
Okay.
I was born and raised in New Haven.
All right. And so what was that journey early? What high school did you go to?
I went to Hill House.
Okay.
Class of 93. So it's great to be back. I went to foot school for elementary school.
Okay.
So I went to private school, and I was one of the only African-American students. So after probably around 9th grade, when I graduated from there, I was like, I need to go to a high school where there are more people that look like me. It was a point in which I really felt like I needed to make that shift. So I went to Hill House in 10th grade. And after that, I went to the University of Maryland in College Park.
Nice.
So I left. Yeah.
The Terrapins.
Go Terps. Go Terps.
There you go.
And I lived and worked in the DC area for about 8 years.
Wow.
My parents were very education focused too. And, I always wanted to be a psychologist. And my parents encouraged me to also, think practically if I didn't go all the way to get a PhD. So I was a special education teacher first in a self-contained classroom for kids with emotional and behavioral issues. So that's really where I got my foundation and like thinking about how to help kids. And so I did that in DC for about 2 years after I graduated from grad school there. And then I moved to Los Angeles. I went to LA for the summer. I saw those palm trees. I was like, I need to live here. So I lived in LA for about 4 years. And then I went to grad school for psychology in upstate New York.
So what do you do now?
So now I have a consulting and assessment company. So I do a lot of forensic evaluations. I do educational evaluations, trauma assessments, consultation in terms of like behavioral support in classrooms for various organizations. And I pretty much, I think I try to help them conceptualize, some of their complicated treatment cases. So that's
Great.
what I do at this point.
That's awesome. So I'm going to go around the room on this one, right? So since we talked about schools, right? We got this pandemic jumping off right about now. Mm-hmm. And all the school districts are thinking about getting back to school, right? Getting kids back to school. And what's the best way, right? There's a conversation about virtual learning, right? And obviously, there's no question, kids have been in the house for a long time. there's a mental health issue associated with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Nakia, tell me, what's your take on this?
Well, obviously, what's interesting is, I guess initially when it started, right, we had no sense of how long this was going to be, and it's clearly not over, and we're not out of the woods. And the interesting thing with the kids that I was mostly helping with, kids who were struggling in school, maybe had learning issues. At least what I'm hearing from my colleagues, some of those kids are actually doing a little bit better remotely. I think particularly the kids with the trauma histories, who the classroom was a little bit intense for them. It's kind of a thing I never expected. That's for some kids, this one-on-one attention with someone, in this virtual space where they don't have all the distractions has actually been a good thing, right? But we know for a lot of other kids, obviously it's tough, and it's clearly tough on parents. So the schools I'm in touch with, it seems like they have been really trying to do a lot of outreach, which is great, trying to drive by the kids' houses, drop off work, drop off care packages, food. So I'm really happy to say that at least the schools I'm familiar with, they've been really trying to support these kids who they know maybe don't have ideal home circumstances.
Right. Dr. Toya, so considering that this is really a complicated issue and that people have to, approach it different ways, what's your take on the combination of type of, efforts that they're looking at in terms of the modality and how they're going to really, focus on with these kids, because it's going to, some kids are going to be going to school 2 days and 3 days. They're going to be at home. Some kids have the opportunity to stay at home the whole time, right? Some kids have the opportunity to just homeschool. They're given a lot of choices. What do you think about Dr. Toya?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like Nakia said, some kids do better with the distractions removed, but other kids, right, do better within the classroom. I think what happens is when you keep the kids home for too long is, in terms of the education, we also miss the socialization piece, right? Because that's a critical part of development at this age. And so when you don't have the opportunities to socialize with same age peers, then we can run into some challenges there. So I think that schools have to think about that part of it as well. Like, how do we not only focus on the education, but how do we also focus on other aspects of development, typical development, when we're talking about opportunities for kids to socialize. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how some of that can get incorporated. And I also think it's important for there to be some kind of professional development with teachers and how to engage students in this new way. I think we were rushed into this, so there wasn't a lot of time for teachers to get prepared for how to best adapt lessons and things like that for this online platform. So I think it's also important that we consider what we can do to support the teachers with either being virtual or helping the kids make the adjustment to go back to in-person learning.
Right. Thank you. Dr. Taj, so you got this podcast being on SoundCloud, y'all. What day is the podcast going to air, or is it airing already?
Yes, our first episode launched last Sunday.
Right. Okay. And it's every Sunday?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things I watched your Zoom with Zeb and Diamond.
Mm-hmm.
Big up to Zeb and Diamond, for great family. And so after it ended, I was speaking to someone that was also on the Zoom, and he was a gentleman who thought about the fact that one of the things that people don't talk a lot about is the PTSD that we suffer as Black people.
Sure.
dealing through this trauma of racism, right? And I'm quite sure so what he said was that I hope that they deal with that issue at some point, right? Is that some of the kind of stuff that you guys are thinking about doing on your show?
Yes, actually, and I said it so quickly because it's one of those things that we laugh about, but it's really serious because we have to, you know, the adage, you have to laugh to keep from crying, right? Because there's
Yes.
some situations that we're the only Black, brown face, right? And so we don't necessarily have allies or people to speak to and support us in those spaces. So we definitely talk about that. That is one of the prevalent topics that we talk about, and how we're received as being, you know, female, or being Black, or being doctors. Those are three areas that tend to sort of make us stand out in these professional spaces. So in spaces, period. So it's definitely one of those topics that we talk about, among other topics.
Right. And Dr. Nakia, in terms of, you know, this, and I know you guys talked about this, you know, on the Zoom with Zeb and Diamond, the issue that is pretty prevalent in our community, where we stay away from mental health treatment, right? And why is that? You know, I mean, you know, can you tell me, you know, in the work that you've done, why is it that we as a people have shunned away from that?
Sure. You know, I think LaToya and I have had this conversation in another kind of circle. I think, you know, our parents, because of this race-based traumatic stress, just survival, we've been in survival mode, and our parents basically raised us to be survivors. And so I think that we navigate the world as if I'm okay, I can do this. And you just have to be focused on kind of managing and navigating these spaces. And so the idea that we could ask for help, that it's okay to ask for help, you know, is making yourself vulnerable. And I think that it's just us rethinking like what wellness looks like for us. And I see this with my students. I teach college as well. And my African-American students, I have to seek them out and say, like, look, I'm here to help you. Come to my office. That's what I'm here for. Whereas students, my other students, they just come to my office as if they're, you know, entitled and expected that I'm going to support them. And so I think as Black people, it's just changing the narrative. Like, we need to go from survival mode to thriving, right? And so that involves having these conversations. Great.
Dr. Toya, so, you know, when the brothers get together, right, it's like, I don't understand my Black woman, right? You know, somebody got to teach me. You know what I mean? We've been in it for the long run, of course, right? You know, but that's an issue that I think that is extremely important. And tell me what is your take on, number one, being able to have that conversation, right, among the three of you, right, and at the same time be able to talk about the negatives and also to talk about, you know, how can we meet, right? Because sometimes we're far away from each other. Right. So Dr. Toya, it's on you. I know I gave you a tough one, right?
Yeah. That's okay though. That's all right.
That's cool.
Well, I think it kind of relates back to Nakia's point of, you know, our mentality of always being in survival mode. It's like, don't show any weakness, right? Like, it's difficult for a lot of us to be vulnerable. And I think in order to understand the perspectives of where Black men are coming from and where Black women are coming from, there needs to be some level of vulnerability, right? Like, we need to be able to be open and honest and talk about the things that are a little bit uncomfortable. And that could be hard to do if we're always taught, like, show no weakness, right? And so I think that sometimes we want to, right? We want to meet each other where we are, but we miss it because it's difficult to let that guard down a little bit. And then I also think sometimes it's like, you know, Black women have a specific type of struggle, as do Black men have a specific type of struggle. And sometimes it's like, you know, what's happening here? Like, it's really hard on this end, but it's also really hard on this end. So I think that sometimes it just becomes a little bit overwhelming in that specific area to talk about these things because, you know, it's just tough and it's hard to be vulnerable.
Dr. Taj, in regard to that issue, right? I mean, obviously, there's some subtle ways that Black women and some overt ways that you deal with racism, to say the least. But they hate us, man. Black men, we go through hell, right?
Sure.
It's like it's out front, man. It's like, yo, here it is, right? I know that I've talked to some folks that issue sometimes becomes a problem when you're dealing with a marriage, right? Because we come home and that's my wife, and I need to be able to lean on her, right? So here's the question again, right? It's like, couples therapy, right?
Sure.
How difficult is that for us as a people, right? Talk to me, Dr. Taj.
Well, I mean, it goes without saying, right? What goes on in the house stays in the house. So it's difficult to take those issues and put them in front of somebody who doesn't know you, nor your significant other, and trust that they will be as transparent with you and support you through the struggles. That's difficult. Dr. Toya spoke to the vulnerability, right? There has to be that level of vulnerability to go sit in front of someone and share those things, because there's a lot of intricate details, that sort of make up a relationship, and you have to be willing to speak to those things and be able to be receptive and open to feedback, good, bad, or indifferent, and take that feedback and sort of apply it, right? And try to grow and do better, right? And that's hard, because you get to a point in time, particularly in your life, where you're like, I know what I know, and that's it, right? And it's now I got to take something from somebody who don't really know me and apply that to my life,
right?
So it's trying to find that balance and be okay with that balance and move forward in the relationship.
Yeah, and have courage, right? It takes a lot of courage
and be and be comfortable with being wrong.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things that you have to be comfortable with.
Right. Ladies, it's been a pleasure talking with you guys, and I'm looking forward to the podcast. I know they're going to be exciting. I will be listening. Again, I want to thank you. And again, Sundays at what time?
It typically hits at midnight, so 12:01 a.m. So it's there.
Okay, very good.
And you can sort of log on. First, we want you to click and subscribe. Make sure you subscribe, because we got some great things coming up down the pike. And when we have we're soon to be launching our website and our Facebook and IG socials. So we want you all to sort of subscribe.
Well, I've got daughters, so I'm partial to the empowerment
yes,
of that you sisters are exhibiting. You know what I mean? I love it, and I want to thank you again for being on the Electric Drum. And please come back.
Absolutely,
and let us know how you're doing. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
No question. Juan Castillo with you. It's the Electric Drum on 94.3 WYBC. We will see you next week.